Joining us now is Fernando Garcia, the executive director of the Border Network for Human Rights for El Paso, Texas. Fernando, thank you so much for giving us some of your time. Let's start the black and white question here. Should all 50 states be sharing the responsibility for taking in migrants?
Definitely. This is a national issue. This is not a border issue. I do believe that everybody is part of the solution, but I want to emphasize that at the end of the day, it's the responsibility of the federal government to fix a system that is broken. We had insisted for years now that the only infrastructure that we had built at the border is being deportation centers, detention centers, border walls, but nothing to welcome, to process with dignity asylum seekers and refugees. So I think there's a big need of the federal government to step with large investments at the border that hadn't happened yet.
All right, so Fernando, why do these migrants that Dre, for example, was just checking in on there in New York City, why do they seem to be doing better compared to the images that we are seeing coming out of El Paso? We're seeing, families, men, women, children sleeping in the streets because there's just no room.
I think it is a false narrative that local communities and local governments and local NGOs would have the capacity to actually process migrants. I think that is not real. I think we are facing a humanitarian crisis where we have people living in the street under freezing conditions, children and women without food and water. So I think what we have is indeed a crisis that cannot be resolved at the local level. I mean, this is something that needs to be addressed rapidly by federal government, even by Congress if necessary. But I think we cannot allow this to happen just to be resolved by local communities.
And Fernando, maybe not a fair question because obviously there are so many different elements to all of this. But what is the solution here? How do we start to get to a solution?
Well, I think that there are multiple ways to see a solution. So there are some short-term solutions and long-term solutions. But I think the first one, what I've been talking about, is the immediate deployment of resources. We need to create welcoming and processing centers at the border in every major city at the border. We call it the New Ellis Island Welcoming Centers, where we can process people with dignity. But also, we need to really take a look at what we have done historically at the border. We need to reform our immigration system, our asylum system, and try to actually have a functional border strategy.
Well, Fernando, before we let you go, talk to us about this welcome center that you're suggesting.
And this is something that we had put in the table for discussion for several years already, where we needed the government to come and be on the ground and deploy resources, personnel, to create centers that are not tied to enforcement or detention centers. There are more humanitarian centers with the support of local communities and the support of NGOs, where people will receive not only legal support, but also basic needs, but things like buying a plane ticket, buying a bus ticket that they cannot do right now, in primarily to be in a place where they can actually be not exposed to this weather that we have here in El Paso and along the border.
Right, and of course, then paying for that and then getting the funding, right, we'll have to figure out a way to do that as well. Fernando Garcia, we thank you so much for your time. Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.